Hello everyone, my name is Enrique Cardona and welcome to another review of my show. And in this case, I'm actually excited to talk about this one. Since the second season of this show is coming out this year, I think there's no better time for me than to talk about Peacemaker. Now, this is a character that a lot of people are not familiar with unless you read the Charlton comics. And in my opinion, this character is obscure until John Cena played him in the Suicide Squad movie. Now, if you want to know my thoughts on the Suicide Squad movie directed by James Gunn, you can check my video on the link in the description. But regardless to say, I will say this that Peacemaker, played by John Cena, was the best part of this movie. Not Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, not Idris Elba as Bloodsport, hell, not even Sylvester Stallone as King Shark. It was John Cena as Peacemaker. Now, obviously, it's a variation from the guy of the comics, but I'll say this, it's a perfect addition for this movie, and the fact that he was still alive at the end of the movie, it shows us how much faith not only does James Gunn have on John Cena, but the studio has on this character. After all, how many times we have seen stories of, Superman, Batman, and all the other DC heroes. Hell, there are a ton of DC heroes in the CW. Well, there were because now they're over. But regardless, all those shows pale in comparison to Peacemaker. And yes, I consider this to be one of the best shows of DC I ever watched. And that's not a small feat. But what about Peacemaker? What happened to him after the events of the Suicide Squad? Well, let's take a look. First of all, I want to say that the opening intro of this show is amazing. Everyone in the cast dancing to the song Do Ya Wanna Taste It by Wigwam. It's amazing. I really love that song because of this show. And to see all the characters dancing to this rhythm is just mind blowing. I mean, what can I say? You need to watch that episode. You need to watch all the episodes with that intro. It's unbelievable and it's hilarious as hell. And it has a little bit of foreshadowing, but I'm gonna save it for later. So the show picks up with Peacemaker, or Christopher Smith, played by John Cena, waking up in the hospital, being released, and going back to his home, only for the team of Argus to capture him, or at the very least, put him on his place and tell him that he needs to work with them in order to stop another threat. In this case, a group of alien invasion called the Butterflies. And this puts Peacemaker in a position of whether he wants to do this again or not. I mean, the events of the Suicide Squad change him, and I'm gonna get into a little bit later, but that's the mission throughout the entire show. Meanwhile, we see that Peacemaker is trying to make amends with his estranged father, played by Robert Patrick, in which he's trying to see the proudness on his eyes. He tries to make his father proud. But the more time passes, he realizes the kind of father that he has and what his life meant after all these years. All the killings, all the abuse, all of everything. This becomes like a inner exploration of who Peacemaker is, who Christopher Smith is. Is he a superhero or is he just a maniac with a gun? And we see the character progression not just for him, but for the people around him. We see the changes he brings to the other Argus teammates, as well as Vigilante. Although Vigilante is more for jokes, but in this case, it's good to see him, and it's good to see that it's a lot of action, and it's good to see a lot of character development for a guy who basically was a douchebag in the first movie. So to see him in this show getting developed is actually pretty nice. So I think it's better time to talk about the characters. So let's start with the man itself, John Cena playing Christopher Smith, aka Peacemaker. Now, it's a very different version of the Peacemaker from what we saw in the Charlton comics. Hell, in other DC comics. But it's honestly good to see because it honestly makes the character a lot more different, but also a lot more deep. I mean, Peacemaker is a guy who loves peace, but yet he uses weapons of mass destruction, guns, AK 47s, all sorts of weird weapons, and a helmet that can blow up people. Well, sorts of helmets with distinct powers in order to give peace to the world. And that's just something that Christopher Smith struggles. After all, the guy was raised. Well, I'm not gonna say what kind of man raised Peacemaker, but let's just say this is the kind of guy that we always hate to see in politics. But regardless of that, it's good to see that Peacemaker is making amends and making different choices in order to save not only the world, but also the people who cares about. And there's a people that now he cares in order for him to change as a better man and probably becoming a better superhero. Which brings us to the other cast members. So let's start with Danielle Brooks playing Leora Adebayo. Now, I know a lot of people don't know who this character is. It's actually pretty new to me, but the one thing that they add is that she is Amanda Waller's daughter. And in this case, Leota is the daughter of Amanda, which she was sent by her in order to not only help Peacemaker, but to frame him in order to cover all the organizations of Argus, in order to make him the scapegoat. And the more time passes, Leota realizes that Chris is not a bad guy. He's just misunderstood. And the fact that she doesn't want to be there, and the fact that despite all having all the skills in the world of being the greatest spy agent, she doesn't want to be those things. She just wants to be a regular normal girl, living with her girlfriend and having a normal life with her dogs. I mean, that's character development, and she becomes the voice of reason for Chris, and that's the important thing that we need to consider. I think Leota, not only does she bring a level of comedy, but she also brings a level of sincerity to the character of Peacemaker. And speaking about the character of Peacemaker having an inner struggle with another conscience of himself, let's talk about Vigilante, aka Adrian Chase, played by Freddie Stroma. This is the kind of character that Deadpool will hang around all the time because he doesn't know anything about morals or having a conscience or feeling bad or having any other emotions. He's just the crazy lunatic in a suit that goes around and kills people, also in the name of peace, but inspired by Peacemaker. It honestly becomes like the angel and devil kind of situation. But in this case, Vigilante is not a bad person. It's just a psychopath who doesn't understand anything. And honestly, while that makes him a little disturbing to say the least, at the very least, he knows where his moral is. And honestly, he's kind of funny to say all these incredible weird lines and jokes that he comes around, or incredible facts, and tries to, trying to be good but still acting like a psychopath even though he doesn't know he's a psychopath. It's just hilarious. Other characters that are introduced in this show are Clemson Mern, played by Chukwudi Iwuji. This guy is basically another Argus agent who was the leader of the Project Butterfly. In this case, the project to take down all the butterflies. But little did we know, he's also a butterfly himself. He possessed the body of Clemson Mern and became Clemson himself. But unlike his other brothers in the butterflies, he doesn't want to kill humanity. He wants to help him, and he's trying his best in order to save the world from his own kind. While he doesn't get too much development in this show, it's good to see that the character is not essentially evil. In fact, he's actually a very good person. It's just that he possesses the worst kind of person because Clemson Mern was not exactly a good guy, and basically redeems the character, and he feels guilty about possessing another person's body. And that's the important thing, to see the actions of our characters and see how they affect not only themselves, but the people around him. That's a good character development for this guy. Another character that is introduced is August or Augie Smith, which is Robert Patrick's version of the father of Peacemaker. Now, Peacemaker's father also had a making in the Charlton comics. He was actually a bad guy who basically took his own life and basically made his son into a killer, and it's no different here. But unlike in the comics version, this guy is still alive and is basically a supervillain called the White Dragon. And this guy doesn't care about morals, doesn't care about people, and he hates his own son. In fact, throughout the entire show, you question why Peacemaker looks up to his guy and you want him just to get rid of him. And honestly, that's actually pretty deep to see the guy who raised Peacemaker essentially show his true colors and show why he doesn't like anybody, including his own damn son, which is saying something. Other characters that we saw in the Suicide Squad movie are Emilia Harcourt and John Economos, played by Jennifer Holland and Steve Agee. Now, these two characters, unlike in the previous movie, which were in the background, get more prominent roles in this show. So, in this case, Harcourt or Emilia is basically the straight man of the team. She doesn't care about the Peacemaker. She doesn't care about Economos or Leota. She just cares about completing the mission and just go home and wait for the other mission. But in this case, it was shown in this episode, in this entire series, that she realizes that she doesn't have to be the straight man all the time, that she can be having fun, she can have fun, she can enjoy life. She realizes that Peacemaker is not a bad guy. She realizes a lot of things from other people, and honestly is a good character development for her, and it's good to see her just show more humanity and realizing that she doesn't need to be that cold. And in the case of John Economos, we see that he is seen like a joke. Like Peacemaker makes fun of him for his beard, for the way he is, for his weight, basically making jokes. And Peacemaker, while he doesn't admit it to him, he is sad to make fun of John Economos and realizes through John that he is also a human being and he has feelings. And John realizes that Christopher Smith is not a bad person, just a guy with a troubled past, a checker past. And that's the important thing for John, realizing through Peacemaker that he's not exactly above him, and realizing that he needs to make a lot of better choices. By the way, John Economos we will see again in the Creature Commando show. I'll talk about that show next time, but for now, let's focus on the show and let's talk about the episodes. Now, all the episodes doesn't have the greatest budget in the world, but in all honesty, it mixes up with great action, great comedy, good, powerful scenes of Peacemaker, a lot of violence because that's something that James Gunn is well known at. There's a ton of side characters that I could talk about, but I'd rather wait for season 2 to talk about them individually in their own episodes. Talking about all the entire show in this video because I think it's important for me to talk about it while I still can, because there's a lot going around and everything flows like one narrative. There is no individual episode. There is no self-contained ones. It's all serialized. So in this case, I'll talk about, I think, all the episodes, starting the ones that are my favorites. In my opinion, the first two episodes, A Whole New World and Best Friends for Never. Those are the episodes that introduce Peacemaker, his side characters, his world, his jokes, and we got introduced to one of his best partners ever, and that is Agley, played by D. Bradley Baker. D. Bradley Baker is a great voiceover actor, so he does all the noises for Eagly. And in my opinion, is honestly great. One of the best things about this show is to see a Peacemaker and Eagly interact. I know that Eagly is basically a CGI character, but that doesn't make it least enjoyable to watch. And honestly, it's good to see the interaction between a human and an animal. And it's good to see that Eagly cares about Christopher as much as Christopher cares about Eagly. It's like the embodiment of his late brother. And that's the important thing because out of all the people that he meets, Igly sticks by him and gives him the best hugs ever captured in television. I'll say this, it gave me tears to my eyes to see that. Other episodes that I enjoy are Monkey Dory, which is the episode in which we see Peacemaker fight a gorilla. I mean, a gorilla that almost sounds like Gorilla Grodd, but it's just hilarious. And it's good to see the character development between him and John Economos. That's the important thing. Or as he likes to call him, Diebeard. I should also mention that Monkey Dory is the episode where John Cena, or at the very least, Christopher Smith goes on a rant into naming all the characters that he could frame for a murder or for something that happens in the first two episodes and goes on a very, very improvised rant. Let me tell you, John Cena as a comedian is amazing. It really puts The Rock into a shame. I mean, Dwayne Johnson is charismatic, but John Cena beats him by a mile. Literally, he beats him all the time. Another episode that I enjoy is Stop Dragging My Heart Around, which is the episode in which we see Peacemaker versus the White Dragon. And it's probably one of the most important episodes because it shows us the level of aggressive abuse that Chris suffered and seeing his own father, the White Dragon, harm all the guys around him is traumatic for him. It makes him realize that he doesn't need his father anymore. So in this episode, spoilers if you haven't seen it, he kills the White Dragon. He kills his own father, Augie Smith. And that shows us that Peacemaker doesn't need his father, even though he wished that he loved him. And that's very powerful. It's actually the best acting that John Cena has ever got in this show. And hopefully we can see that in other future projects. And finally, the final episode is Cow or Never. It's honestly one of my favorite finales because it shows us all the characters realizing that they need to stop this threat before it's too late and puts Peacemaker into the test of realizing what's best for humanity, the butterflies or just the people making their own choices. It's also one of the shows that shows us the cameos of the Justice League. At the very least, they show us Aquaman and the Flash. And while Jason Momoa will play Lobo in the Supergirl, it's good to see that he's still the bottom of the joke. And despite Ezra Miller being a horrible person, it's good to see that Jason Momoa calls him out and saying, well, F you, Barry. I'll say this, it feels gratifying to know that and to know that Ezra Miller is not playing the Flash anymore. One day I'm gonna have to talk about the Flash movie because boy, that movie was so bad. But it was the only necessary change to begin a new chapter for the DC universe. And that's the important thing. This was made in between the old DC universe and the new one because in this case, because of this show and because of the Suicide Squad movie, that it got people to realize in Warner Brothers that James Gunn is the guy to direct all the DC shows, or DC shows and movies, basically. And because of Peacemaker, he actually becomes the head of DC Studios. So you see that, Dwayne? You don't have to make a movie about Black Adam and say, oh, the hierarchy of power is going to change in the DC universe forever. Like, you were right, But you weren't the it factor. It was James Gunn, and more importantly, it was John Cena. See how the final boss eats it. I'm sorry. Nothing against The Rock. It's just that when he made that movie, it made us realize how badly we needed James Gunn and how badly John Cena was missed. And honestly, it's good that he's having another season. So, with that said, what about the effects of this movie? Well, the effects are basically minimal. Like I said, it doesn't have the greatest budget in the world. But it was honestly one of the best effects for a TV show for a streaming service like Max, and it was good to see a little bit more practical effects. There was more violence, and there was more, all the gory stuff. But unlike The Voice, that is ridiculous, it's honestly good to see that this show is slowing it down and give us more character development. And it's good to see that the Peacemaker character is getting, not only that he got his own show and is going to get a second season, but also that he appeared in Mortal Kombat 1 as a playable character, also voiced by John Cena. That's the important thing. John Cena is making this character, this obscure character, very relevant. Now, what makes John Cena's Peacemaker different from all the other obscure DC heroes that we have seen in other shows, in the CW or in other Max series? Well, the thing is, he's actually given more character development. Let me put it to you this way. I watch all the CW DC shows: Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, Batwoman, Black Lightning, Superman and Lois. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, Superman and Lois is one of my favorite shows because it gives us the humanity of Superman. Black Lightning, despite not being perfect, it was good to see an Afro American superhero fighting crime along with his family. But what about the rest of the shows? I don't like them. There was a time that I really enjoyed Arrow, and I honestly stopped watching after a few seasons. Flash got ridiculous. Supergirl, well, not a bad show, but it basically made her Superman girlish. Okay, that's not fair to say, but because everyone in there was great. My favorite characters on that show are Brainy and Neonal, and but in all honesty, it wasn't that much to write about. Batwoman, I don't like that show. And Legends of Tomorrow, well, here's the thing. While I am not a DC fan, I'd say I feel bad for those people who play these characters, but I never liked that show, and I don't think I'm ever gonna muster the enthusiasm to watch an entire season of The Legends of Tomorrow. I know that you say in this life, never say never, but honestly, out of all the shows that I watched from DC, and that includes Titans, Stargirl, and Doom Patrol, I want to watch Peacemaker all the time because he not only was a great character to put on a show, but it was the necessary shake for the DC world to say we need to make shows and we need they are good, and we need this guy James Gunn to direct more movies and make more TV shows based on the characters that we haven't touched. I mean, we're gonna get a Lantern series after years of people saying the Green Lantern was bad. By the way, the Green Lantern 2011 movie, I don't think it's that bad as many people make it out to be. One day I'll talk about it, but honestly, there's too much to talk about. But regardless, it was a necessary shock to the system that we needed for this show. Because Peacemaker not only is just a violent show about a guy who kills guys, it was about a show about a superhero who people see as a villain, but trying to make the best choices to become a superhero. It's basically he's a sucky person trying to be less sucky. And that's the important thing about this show. It's basically giving us characters that change through the course of the show and make them realize that they can be less sucky and be better people. That's the important thing about Peacemaker. And that's something that I really enjoy about this show. And the fact that John Cena plays it not only does makes it 100 times better than I ever thought, but in all honesty, makes me realize that John can have a normal life in the movie industry, making other characters memorable. I mean, yeah, I'm a big John Cena fan. Let me tell you right now, I'm a John Cena fan. I'm not ashamed to admit it. As a kid, I used to watch his matches. I enjoy the fact that he was a good guy. And yes, you're probably gonna make me. You're probably gonna hear this once, and you're probably gonna hear this, and you'll say, "What?" But yeah, I like that John Cena never turned heel because he was the only character that I could relate and I could look up to. And that's the important thing. I didn't care if he never turned heel in other shows, in other wrestling promotions, or in other wrestling shows in WWE. And the fact that he left to become Peacemaker, it's amazing. Right now, we are in the midst of his final run of as a pro wrestler in WWE. And that's going to be a hell of a ride. Hopefully, he becomes champion again, whether he becomes world champion or any other type of champion. But in the meantime, I hope that this video brings people to realize that John Cena is not just a pro wrestler, but a great comedian and a great actor. And hopefully, he makes more shows like this in the near future. Or hell, more movies like that in the near future. Because he understands the task of being an actor just like Dave Bautista understood it. So that's the important thing. And it makes us realize that maybe The Rock is not exactly a great actor and that he needs to realize that he needs to push himself to be better as an actor. Who knows? I mean, this is just a guy talking about his love for this guy and why I consider him the perfect guy to play Peacemaker. But regardless of that, regardless of your opinion, I hope you see this show. This is such a magnificent show. You can watch it on Max Prime or in HBO Max. I don't know what it's called these days. But basically, search for this show and watch John Cena at his best as Peacemaker. You won't regret it. So, yeah, that's my review of Peacemaker, and I cannot wait for season 2. So, next time I'm going to talk about Creature Commandos starting with the first episode. So, until then, I'm being Enrique, and I'll see you later. Peace.